happens quietly, subtle, invisible to almost everyone else. And that's why so many adults miss it. ADHD doesn't always look like hyperactivity. Sometimes it looks like the version of you people praise for being busy, driven, or responsible, even while your inner world is in constant, exhausting motion. And today, you're going to understand the symptoms almost no one talks about, the ones that explain years of confusion, self-blame, and feeling out of sync with the rest of the world, so you can finally see yourself with compassion instead of criticism, because your brain has been trying to tell you something for a long time. Imagine this moment with me. It's late evening, and Mara sits at her kitchen table, surrounded by the quiet hum of the refrigerator. The day is over, but her mind is not. She stares at her planner, 3 pages of unfinished tasks, and feels that familiar mix of frustration and embarrassment. She had started the morning determined, promising herself that today would be different. But as always, the day slipped away in fragments. She jumped from idea to idea like sparks from a fire pit, each one bright, urgent, and impossible to ignore. She can't explain why small tasks, simple emails, forms, phone calls, felt heavier than they should. Why did she miss a deadline? Again. Why she spent 2 hours deep diving into reorganizing her photo gallery instead of completing the report due tomorrow? Why does she feel guilty even though she worked all day? And she wonders quietly if maybe she's just undisciplined. Maybe other people are simply better at being adults. But what if the problem isn't discipline at all? What if the real issue is that Mara has spent years living with a version of ADHD that no one ever helped her recognize? And that's what you'll learn in this video. The symptoms most adults overlook or misinterpret, the ones rooted in how the brain regulates attention, emotion, time, and motivation. By the end, you'll understand why someone like Mara feels overwhelmed inside while looking fine on the outside. And you may recognize pieces of your own story in hers. Because adult ADHD rarely looks the way most people expect. Let's step deeper into Mara's day. Not the dramatic moments, the quiet ones. The ones that blend together until they feel normal. She wakes up already behind because she stayed up late the night before. Not because she wanted to, but because her mind wouldn't stop racing. She kept doing just one more thing, unable to shut off her internal motor. When she finally slept, it was out of exhaustion rather than routine. Before she even brushes her teeth, her thoughts have already spiraled into a dozen directions. She remembers a bill that's due, a text she forgot to send, an idea for a new project, and the nagging fear that she is forgetting something important. At work, she tries to focus, but focus works like a light switch with loose wiring. It's either completely off or blindingly bright. If the task is stimulating, she can hyperfocus with laser intensity, losing hours without realizing it. But if the task is mundane or repetitive, her attention slides off it like water off glass. Her boss once told her, "You're so smart. Why can't you just do the simple stuff consistently?" She didn't know how to explain that her brain didn't filter information like other people's brains. Everything felt equally loud. Emails, conversations, her own thoughts, the clicking pen from across the room. It wasn't a lack of caring. It wasn't a lack of trying. It was something deeper. This is where we shift into the psychology of what's happening under the surface. Because ADHD in adults is not about willpower. It's about how the brain prioritizes and regulates attention. And that begins with the networks that manage executive functioning. In simplest terms, your brain's manager struggles to keep systems running smoothly. Tasks don't get sorted by importance. Time doesn't get processed like a sequence. Emotions hit harder and linger longer. Dopamine, the chemical that helps with reward, motivation, and task initiation, flows differently. So the brain searches for stimulation, novelty, or clarity to activate motivation. That's why you might start 20 tasks but finish only 2. It's why simple chores feel overwhelming while big creative projects feel energizing. It's why you procrastinate even when you care. It's why you lose track of time, overthink small decisions, or get stuck in cycles of guilt and overcompensation. And these subtle symptoms often get misread as personality flaws instead of brain-based patterns. Many adults with ADHD grew up masking these struggles without ever being understood. But let's go back to Mara. because her story shows how these symptoms intertwine in ways that rarely get recognized. After work, she tries to unwind, but her brain doesn't switch off. It flips into a different kind of intensity. She scrolls on her phone, not because she wants to waste time, but because the steady drip of stimulation soothes her. She stands in the kitchen, unable to decide what to cook, paralyzed by options that feel equally overwhelming. Sometimes she blurts out thoughts impulsively and later replays the conversation, wondering why she couldn't just pause. Sometimes her emotions spike fast and unexpectedly. Frustration, impatience, sadness, like sudden storms that clear just as quickly. One of the most overlooked symptoms. Rejection sensitivity. When someone criticizes her or even seems disappointed, she doesn't just feel bad, she feels shattered. It hits her with a force that seems disproportionate, but that's her nervous system reacting intensely to perceived disapproval. Over the years, she learned to avoid situations where she might fail, or disappoint others or be judged. People think she's strong, but she's exhausted from holding everything together. And the most painful part, she hides all of this. She laughs about being scatterbrained. She tells friends she's just busy. She jokes that she's bad with time. She wears these labels like armor to cover up the things she can't quite name. Then comes the moment in our story, the moment everything shifts. It happens on a random Tuesday afternoon. Mara is in a meeting, trying to follow the discussion. She's doing everything she can to stay mentally present, taking notes, making eye contact, drinking water. But her attention keeps drifting. Suddenly, someone asks her a question. She blanks. Not because she wasn't listening, but because her brain was processing everything at once and couldn't filter the relevant details. Her co-workers stare at her with mild confusion. Mara laughs it off, but inside, she feels the weight of 20 years of being misunderstood collapse onto her shoulders. That night she breaks down. Not dramatically, quietly. She sits on the floor of her bedroom and finally asks the question she's been avoiding. What if there's something real happening inside my brain? What if it's not laziness? What if it's not my fault? For many adults, this is the turning point. The moment of realization. The moment long-standing self-blame gives way to curiosity. And it's often the moment people start researching, reading, watching videos, trying to understand why life has always felt heavier and more chaotic than it looks for other people. Here's where the deeper emotional insight unfolds, because understanding adult ADHD is not just about identifying symptoms. It's about healing the years of shame attached to them. It's about recognizing how long you've pushed yourself without support. It's about seeing your life through a new lens that honors your brain's strengths, not just its struggles. Hyperfocus. That's creativity, intensity, and passion. Idea generation. That's innovation. Sensitivity. That's empathy. Restlessness. That's energy. But these strengths shine brightest when you understand the challenges that come with them. The missed symptoms most adults overlook include emotional overwhelm that feels sudden and intense, difficulty initiating tasks even when they matter deeply, chronic mental fatigue from keeping up appearances, constantly feeling behind despite working non-stop, time blindness, where 10 minutes and 2 hours can feel the same, decision paralysis, especially with mundane choices, and the exhaustion of masking your struggles to appear normal. Let's look at what happens next in Mara's story, because it mirrors what many people experience when they finally see themselves clearly. She schedules an evaluation. She sits with a clinician and, for the first time, says her symptoms out loud. I'm overwhelmed all the time. I can't regulate small emotions. I forget things even when I try hard. I lose track of time. I overthink everything. When the clinician gently explains how ADHD can look in adults, subtle, internal, emotional, Mara feels a wave of relief so powerful it almost knocks her breath away. Not because she wants a diagnosis, but because she finally has an explanation. Framework. A name for the invisible storm she's been navigating alone. Suddenly, she can look back at her entire life with new understanding. The messy bedrooms that never stayed organized, the report cards that said brilliant but inconsistent, the relationships strained by emotional intensity, the frustration of knowing what she needed to do but feeling blocked by something inside. And the moment she learns that her symptoms are not character flaws, she begins to heal. This is the emotional core of adult ADHD that most people never see. The grief of realizing how hard you've had to work to compensate, the relief of knowing you weren't imagining your struggles, the release that comes from no longer blaming yourself for something rooted in neurobiology, the possibility of rewriting the story of your life with more compassion and less pressure. Understanding ADHD means understanding how your nervous system works. It means recognizing that your brain is not broken. It's wired differently. It thrives on stimulation, novelty, clarity, and emotional connection. And when you give it the right structure, the right habits, the right supports, it can excel in extraordinary ways. So let's return to Mara one last time. On a Saturday morning, a few months into her journey, she sits at the same kitchen table where she once felt overwhelmed. But today, her planner looks different. Not empty, just realistic. Tasks broken down into smaller, manageable pieces. Timers set. Breaks scheduled. She doesn't aim for perfection anymore, just progress. She understands her signals better now. When she feels time slipping, she grounds herself. When emotions surge, she pauses. When overwhelm appears, she uses tools she never knew existed. She speaks to herself with more patience, more gentleness, more truth. She no longer sees herself as too much or not enough. She sees herself accurately, someone whose brain works differently and beautifully when understood. And that's what I want for you. To understand your brain. To see your patterns with clarity instead of shame. To recognize the symptoms most adults miss. Not to label yourself, but to free yourself from the weight of confusion. If parts of Mara's story felt familiar, I encourage you to stay curious about your brain. Learn more. Explore. Seek support if you need to. ADHD doesn't define you, but understanding it can transform how you move through the world. If this story opened something in you, stick with this channel. We'll keep exploring the mind-brain connection together. Gently, clearly, and with compassion, so you can build the resilience and self-awareness you deserve. Stay, learn, and let's keep going.